Long before NFL stadiums and NBA arenas became commonplace in our city's skylines, building such a structure was an unprecedented concept, and no one was sure if these sports palaces were really good investments of taxpayer money. Enter 1970s Indianapolis and Market Square Arena. Before sports were big money, the city decided to embark on a complete transformation of its image, an image centered around sports. The road that led to a modern, sports-centered Indianapolis began with a single decision: to build an arena worthy of a city for its lone professional sports team. And the result was a dramatic change for the Circle City and all levels of sports. Join me today as we review the events that led to construction of one of the first modern NBA arenas, why it was so impactful, and what's happened at the site since its demise. My name is Lee Brees, and this is Modern Ruins, Episode 10. Despite having the sports reputation it's known for today, Indianapolis had its humble beginnings, just like any other modern city. By the early 1960s, the state capital of Indiana was simply known for being just that, with business and enterprise spread throughout, yet still latent. The city didn't quite suffer as impactful a decline as Rust Belt cities were experiencing, but without a significant skyline, the enormous, abandoned factories and industrial spaces still dominated the landscape, and the city still dealt with being hollowed out due to the decline in industry and growth of suburbia. Downtown Indianapolis was dead on most days, with bars and taverns closing at 6 o'clock when all the business people went home because there was simply no nightlife and nothing to do downtown, and Indy earned the reputation of Naptown as a result of its common dull state, and was considered Indy a no place due to the city's lack of a national image. Pigeons became the city's most populous resident, and JCs were licensed to go out in broad daylight and shoot as many pigeons as they could, nailing as many as 500 a day. Indy would come alive once a year for the perennial running of the Indianapolis 500, and had some minor league sports teams to entertain the few residents who were around at night, but broader attention in sports was focused upstate and downstate on rivalry schools Purdue and IU. It was clear that the Circle City was at a fork in the road and needed to make a decision about its future, and after a period of white flight to the suburbs, fears began to grow about what might become of the state's capital city. Then in 1967, the arrival of professional sports in the Indiana Pacers began to take the city down at the time the road less traveled, and on the path to becoming arguably the sports capital of the world. Earlier in the decade, countless individuals were trying to capture the growing success Major League sports were having by creating rivals to the establishment, with the young NBA being seen as the most vulnerable to competition. When news about the potential for a new basketball sports league reached Indianapolis, several investors from a variety of backgrounds quickly found a way to scrap a franchise together and were an integral part of the founding of the American Basketball Association. At the time, Indiana was at the height of Hoosier hysteria and where basketball was most well known, so it seemed almost necessary that its capital city have a professional basketball team. League founders revealed later the sole reason for founding the ABA was to create enough hype and business opportunity to force the predominant NBA to a merger. And that was it. 11 teams would end up coming together to become the new league, and the first game would be played between the Anaheim Amigos and the Oakland Oaks on October 13, 1967. The Indiana Pacers originally wanted to host games at the iconic Hinkle Fieldhouse on the campus of Butler University, where the highly anticipated annual high school state basketball championship was played, but were turned away. The only other option at the time was the 7,000-seat Indiana State Fairgrounds Coliseum, which featured mostly ice shows. The venue was constructed in 1939 as a part of one of President FDR's New Deal programs. With barely enough cash to pay players, the team was just happy to have somewhere to play, and most of the time the basketball wood floor was just thrown on top of the ice. Over the course of the ABA's brief 9-year existence, the Pacers became the league's most dominant franchise, winning 3 championships in 4 years, and appeared in the ABA Finals 5 times, leading the league in attendance every season, feeding off the state's Hoosier hysteria. Indianapolis fell in love with its new sports team, and games in the tiny Coliseum quickly became standing room only. And while most cities across the nation would wait a decade or more to build a fitting facility for their professional basketball teams, the Pacers needed the new facility now. The first proposal the Pacers released was Capitome, located in what is today White River State Park, and would be large enough to house football and baseball, but was seen as a joke more than a practical idea, and the team clearly had no way to fund a project of that scale. They then proposed a smaller and cheaper arena that would border I-465 on the northwest side of town, still with no means of paying for it. The Pacers' most recent proposal got the attention of basketball fan and Indianapolis Mayor Richard Lugar, who looked at the success the Pacers were having and saw the ruin his city currently was, and believed that the attention and fan base the Pacers had could be used to draw people into sleepy Naptown. At the time, the city had a surplus of federal funds and had the capital to assist the franchise in building a new arena, but insisted that it be placed downtown in the heart of the city, which was contrast to the first two proposals, where many thought there was more demand for professional sports in the suburbs. The original idea for the new arena came from two Ball State architecture students, Joseph Manier and Terry Pastorino, who chose to design an urban development project in downtown Indianapolis as their fourth-year design studio project, and the city eventually caught wind of their ideas and used their final project as a tool to promote public support for the new sports venue. The two students originally suggested a 4-story office building that spanned 2 city blocks and featured a unique space frame design that went over Market Street. The city turned over their project to a group of 4 separate architectural firms who transformed their ideas into Market Square Arena, which featured one of the only elevated playing surfaces ever constructed, supported by 2 5-story parking garages. Ground was broken on October 20th, 1971, and construction would continue for almost 3 years. Arguably the nation's first modern NBA arena opened on September 15th, 1974 for a Glenn Campbell concert with a capacity of 16,500 fans and a final construction cost of $23 million, all funded by the city of Indianapolis through federal funds. The Pacers would play their first game in the new arena in a preseason ABA matchup with the Milwaukee Bucks with nearly 17,000 in attendance. Their first regular season appearance came on October 18th in a double overtime loss to the San Antonio Spurs, with only 7,500 in attendance, and their first regular season win in the new venue would come less than a week later. Market Square Arena opened amidst ABA and NBA negotiations, but with the Pacers' great success in the league, there was no doubt the team had a bright future in front of it, even with roadblocks along the way. Merger talks between the NBA and ABA had begun in 1970, but antitrust lawsuits delayed the merger from occurring until 1976, and by that point, only 6 ABA teams remained. Only 4 of the 6 franchises would be accepted into the new NBA, with the other 2 folding entirely. However, the NBA labeled the entrance of new teams as an expansion and not a merger, and put quite a squash to the ABA's legacy by refusing to recognize ABA records and demanding a $3.2 million expansion fee to each team before their first game. In addition, the new franchises were not allowed to participate in the 1976 NBA draft. They also wouldn't be given any television revenue for their first 3 seasons, and were forced to compensate the 2 defunct ABA franchises as a settlement in the agreement. With little to no legal methods to raise revenue, many of the new NBA teams were forced to sell off their top players to other franchises, and sluggish season ticket sales proved life-threatening in most cases. Even with room to sell countless season tickets, the Pacers were not immune to the endemic caused by the NBA's demands, and after becoming dead broke, the franchise turned to its fans to keep them alive, and the first real test of the NBA's viability in Indianapolis had arrived. The Pacers held a last-second telethon to keep them from moving or folding altogether, with the goal of selling 8,000 season tickets by the end of the event.
Bob? We're at 8,028.
They wound up selling 8,028 after a last-second push, barely scraping by, but the achievement proved to be an emotional win for the team and an important one for the future of Indianapolis. The Pacers finished their first NBA season 36-46 after having to trade many of their key players for cash, and had only 2 winning seasons in their first 13 years in the league. On-court performance was premeditated by action in the front office by making terrible trades, the most significant being trading out of the 1984 NBA draft, when they had the worst record in the Eastern Conference, and the Pacers would have received the second overall pick. The 1984 draft would end up producing unprecedented talent such as Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, John Stockton, Charles Barkley, and Sam Perkins. This reputation of terrible deals is something that plagues the franchise, even to modern times. The Pacers drafted Clark Kellogg 8th overall in 1982, but the team would finish the following season with their worst record of all time at 20-62 and continued with an annual losing streak. In 1987, the Pacers drafted Reggie Miller 11th overall from UCLA. The pick was controversial because locals wanted the team to draft Indiana Hoosiers standout and Bob Knight product Steve Alford. Reggie Miller would be the first Pacer since the merger to be an NBA All-Star in 1990, but in the years that followed, the Pacers would routinely lose in the first round of the playoffs, usually in a sweep. In 1993, Larry Brown was brought on as Pacers head coach and made several highly criticized trades. The team finished the 1993-94 season with an NBA franchise-high 47 wins and won their first playoff series in the NBA, sweeping Shaquille O'Neal and the Orlando Magic, and upset the Atlanta Hawks in the Eastern Conference semifinals. The 2-decade-old Market Square Arena was poised to host its first national profile games in the Eastern Conference Finals, and with momentum on their side, the Pacers were ready to put up a fight. The 1994 Eastern Conference Finals between the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks would prove to be one of the most iconic episodes of said event, mainly thanks to Reggie Miller and his feud with Knicks celebrity superfan Spike Lee. Both teams won games on their home courts to tie the series at 2 apiece, and in Game 5, Reggie Miller infamously flashed a choke sign at Spike Lee after he had been egging Miller on for most of the series. Reggie finished the game with 25 points in the fourth quarter alone to lead the Pacers to victory in Madison Square Garden. However, the Knicks would win the following 2 games and move on to the 1994 NBA Finals. A year later, the team finished with 50 wins and once again met the Knicks in the conference semifinals, where Miller infamously scored 8 points in 9 seconds in Game 1 to shock the Knicks, and the Pacers would go on to win the series in 7 games before losing to the Orlando Magic in the Eastern Conference Finals, also pushing the series to 7 games. The Pacers would go on to the playoffs the following year, but lost in the first round and went on a brief losing season streak. The 1995-96 Pacer team was notable, however, for defeating the Michael Jordan-led Chicago Bulls twice that season, to which the Bulls finished with a 72-10 record. The venue would also host Michael Jordan's first game since he returned to the Bulls from a 2-year stint in professional baseball, which was the most-watched NBA game in 2 decades. In their final 2 years at Market Square Arena, the Pacers would make the Eastern Conference Finals, but came just short in Game 7 in 1998 and lost the series 4-2 in 1999, leaving the arena empty of any finals banners. Even though Market Square Arena never got to see championship games for its main tenant, the venue hosted several other notable events, mainly concerts. The arena was also home to the Indiana Loves, the Indianapolis Checkers, the Indianapolis Ice, the Indiana Twisters, and the Indianapolis Racers, to which National Hockey League legend Wayne Gretzky scored his first professional goal at the arena, 17 years old at the time. MSA also hosted the city's first NCAA Final Four in 1980, featuring Iowa, Louisville, Purdue, and UCLA, with the Louisville Cardinals defeating the UCLA Bruins and future Pacers head coach Larry Brown 59-54, and despite leaving the arena off the visitors' map, Indy wound up impressing the NCAA enough to bring the event back to the city several times in later decades, which had other domino effects. Also in sports, the legendary Indiana High School State Basketball Championship was moved to the arena from the historic Hinkle Fieldhouse, where the game had been played since the 1920s. Billy Graham led a crusade at Market Square Arena in 1980, and the event would be the most attended in the venue's history. In 1987, when Indianapolis hosted the Pan American Games, MSA was used for basketball, which featured several future NBA players, such as David Robinson and Danny Manning. The U.S. team led at halftime in the championship game, but was shocked by Brazil, who won 120 to 115. Other events there included circuses, ice capades, speed skating, monster truck shows, indoor motocross racing, and rodeos. Market Square Arena would be Indiana's de facto concert venue until construction of Deer Creek Music Center Amphitheater in 1989, to which the two would split concerts after that, with MSA hosting larger acts, even after its successor was constructed. Notable concerts for Market Square Arena include the Bee Gees, John Mellencamp, Motley Crue, Kiss, and Michael Jackson's back-to-back sold-out shows on his Bad World Tour in his only performances in his home state as an adult. The most notable concert in the history of entertainment in Indianapolis came on June 26, 1977, when Elvis Presley performed his final concert there, only 7 weeks prior to his death, and a plaque commemorates the event at the former arena site to this day. Even in the early days of the arena, while the Pacers were still in the ABA, Market Square proved to be a pivotal point for downtown Indianapolis and helped the city embark down the path of the sports strategy from its fork in the road. The venue was an instant hit, and dull and lonely Indianapolis had its diamond in the rough that brought people downtown from the suburbs, and the city became revitalized through sports over time. The whole transformation to a sports city is definitely worthy of its own video or entire series, so we won't delve much further into it, but Market Square Arena was the first building block and first big commitment on that path, and to say the city of Indianapolis would have gotten to where it ended up without the decision to construct the arena when they did is simply not plausible. With the sports transformation ongoing, Indianapolis was always looking towards the future, and specifically to what infrastructure and facilities were needed to continue attracting world-class sporting events. Being one of the earlier modern NBA arenas, dating back to the ABA days, Market Square Arena was no longer a current facility, and in fact, the 1990s became a building boom for NBA facilities as new amenities like luxury suites became expected by fans and increased profits for venue managers. Given the trend of new NBA arenas being constructed across the league, the Indiana Sports Corp, which began as the first of its kind in 1979, knew their dating site was never going to bring notable professional basketball events like the NBA All-Star Game to town. So the decision was made to replace Market Square Arena after only a little over 2 decades of use. The new arena would be larger and more spacious. It would obviously contain many luxury suites, but also feature larger club seats and wider and more open concourses, which created a more inviting and desirable experience for those attending games. Unique to the new facility, the retro design was meant to emulate the large high school field houses located throughout the state, with several having only slightly lower seating capacities. The final renderings included large windows above opposite sides of seating and large wall-like stands that, despite having larger seats, made the site much more tight yet engaging, keeping fans close to the action. Ground was broken for the new field house in July 1997, and construction continued for 28 months. The venue, named Conseco Fieldhouse after a local financial services firm purchased naming rights, opened for the Pacers' first game of the 1999-2000 season against the Boston Celtics, winning 115-108. This time around, though, Larry Bird was on Indiana's side as he served as Pacers head coach for 4 seasons. The seating capacity was listed at almost 18,000 for basketball, and the final bill was over $183 million. The Pacers had lost their final game in Market Square Arena 1 year prior, with the Detroit Pistons defeating them in overtime in the final game of the 1998-99 season. The Pacers would go on to have an unprecedented run, going to the NBA Finals for the first and only time in 2000, but lost to the Kobe Bryant and Shaq-led Los Angeles Lakers 4-2. At the time, Market Square Arena was still standing, which presented unique aerial shots of the city's skyline during the season and championship series. The city of Indianapolis, however, had no need for two arenas and was eager to remove the 25-year-old Market Square Arena from its balance sheet. After hosting 302 concerts, the last one held at the arena was on October 17, 1999, featuring ZZ Top and Lynyrd Skynyrd, and major events were moved to the new Conseco Fieldhouse after that. Market Square Arena now sat completely abandoned, with its final fate well known, as it awaited permits and demolition crews to arrive to erase the momentous sports venue from the map entirely. Its final day came on July 8, 2001, when in the early morning, fans gathered and local media broadcasted its implosion. It only took 12 seconds to convert the unique facility and its parking garages to a pile of rubble on the ground. Despite the availability of valuable downtown real estate, the site was a gravel parking lot for more than a decade. Meanwhile, Alan Clough constructed a monument to the late Elvis Presley in the gravel lot that paid tribute to the venue that hosted his final concert. It wasn't until 16 years later that Cummins opened its global distribution headquarters on a portion of the former Market Square Arena site. 1 year later, a 28-story luxury apartment and condo complex opened containing a 40,000 square foot Whole Foods market, and the Elvis Memorial was moved to the site of the new building. Other than the brick-paved road from Monument Circle that was part of a city beautification project decades prior, Market Square Arena has been completely erased. For the generations since, without the Elvis Presley plaque, there's no connection between the Indianapolis of old and the Indianapolis of now. I think from the outside looking in, there's nothing special about Market Square Arena, hosting only a few non-pro championship games and other events, but to Hoosiers, the arena was the beginning of the monumental transformation of Indianapolis, and for that reason alone, well, maybe because of Elvis too, it will never be forgotten. It also carried on the state's legacy of high school basketball, joining Hinkle Fieldhouse and later the Hoosier Dome as the only venues to host the high school state basketball championship during the pre-class basketball days of Hoosier hysteria. An essential building block to the development of the great city of Indianapolis, Market Square Arena will always be the place where it all began. And on that note, thank you for watching. Subscribe to LaBreeze TV for more Modern Ruins content. And be sure to comment what modern ruin you'd like us to cover next.